What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we are back, and our favorite episode of the offseason, Who's Back? So we're going to talk about 8 teams and the backness of these 8 teams, which I will explain in just 1 second. But Daniel, I'm excited for this episode. Did you have a good week, man?
Yeah, man. I look forward to this episode every year. We came up with a topic, when we first started out as far as a good off-season topic, just because we realized, how many of these different fan bases want to get back. And it's like, how many times can you proclaim that you're back? And what are you back to? What is your standard? And so it also begs the question, will you ever be back? Some of these schools, it's been a very long time. So we love doing this. We were back a couple weeks ago because we had our long hiatus.
We were back.
So we're wanting to rank the backness of several of these storied programs who have a rich history. And that's what's so great about college football is the rich history that it has. So
here are the stipulations of the 8 teams we chose. So these are the same 8 teams we've done for the last. This is our 3rd iteration of this, Daniel. So we've used the same 8 teams. These are teams who have won national championships, but none of them have won them in the last decade. So now it's been the last 12 years because still none of them have won one since we started. And so it's a lot of programs that people are talking about. When will X be back? And I mean, obviously, first one that comes to mind is Texas, right? And that's,
I feel like that's
obviously on the list. Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, 2018. I think it's where this started was Sam Ellinger's, we're back. We recorded that next year, I think, of like the first Who's Back episode. So, right. Yeah, Texas on there. I'll run through the 8 teams real quick, Daniel. So, Texas, Tennessee, Nebraska. Hey, they're a big 90s team. They want to get back. Penn State, Miami, Notre Dame, Michigan. So, a lot of programs that have won national championships, none of the last decade. And most of them, I think, let's see, USC and Texas are the only ones who have won one this century. So, and those were in 2004 and 2005. So it's been a minute. So let's rank the backness of these programs. Here's the fun part is you and I have different lists and backness is a little bit subjective. So I kind of defined how I, think of backness and you've defined how you define who's back. So Daniel, give me your number 1 team. Who is the most back of the 8 teams we're talking about?
So I think that this one's obvious. I think we probably have the same one. And it's going to be my same one from last year, Notre Dame. So Notre Dame is as back can be on this list. They're very close to graduating from this list because they've been back for a little bit now. They have been to, 2 college football playoffs. They went to a national championship game in 2012. So, relatively recent, at least within the last 10 years. So I think you put a couple of those things together, pretty good recruiting classes. They're not really a laughing stock. Like growing up, I think you were probably the same way, Jacob. It was like, what's going on with Notre Dame? They kept going from coach to coach, Tyrone Willingham to Charlie Weiss, and just these guys that just couldn't get it done. Brian Kelly definitely stabilized the program. I think he raised the floor from where they had been.
Definitely.
And just definitely got them going on the right track. The only caveat, really, the only chink in the armor is I want to see what Marcus Freeman does. I have a lot of faith in what he's doing because he just seems like a winner, and I like what he's done so far already. I'm excited to see what he does his first full season. He's just one of those fast riser guys, but as a program, I mean, there is a national championship. They are the closest one to a national championship, probably, as far as on this list. And then, that's the only thing that would put them back, as far as being in it every year, they're in it every year. I don't see them unless there's a huge drop off with Marcus Freeman. I don't see them in the foreseeable future, going away. I think that they are a 10-2, 11-1 every year, putting themselves in the playoff conversation, if not going to the playoff, if there's a year where you have 2 lost conference champions. So
copy paste. Yeah, Notre Dame's number one. They're the one I talked about last episode. Like, have they graduated from being back? Because again, I have two chinks in the armor. One, they haven't won a national championship, right? But again, I think in the Saban era, that is so tough to judge a team based on like you haven't won a title yet because it's hard to win a national championship. And in college football, again, like one team wins it and you have to be almost perfect throughout the regular season. And in Notre Dame's case, you do have to be perfect in the regular season.
Right.
Like, you have to go undefeated to get in the playoff right now. And they've done it twice. So like as far as the critique of them is Alabama's been in their way so far. And one of those years it was Clemson. And that 2018 Clemson team is one of the best ever, in my opinion. So outside of that, yeah, I agree with you. The same thing. Marcus Freeman is just a question mark for me. But if you want something to believe in, 2 straight top 10 classes. This year's class ranked 7th. Next year's class, the 2023 class, as of right now, it's ranked 1st in the country. So I have stuff to believe in. They've recruited typically at a top 15, top 20 level. Notre Dame's a tougher school to get into, and they have the academic stuff to worry about. But to recruit at a top 10 level at Notre Dame is really impressive. So credit to Brian.
All the smart kids.
Right. I mean, credit to Brian Kelly for getting it last year and Marcus Freeman for, after Brian Kelly leaving, not only keeping a top 10 class, but doing better than the previous year, being 7th in the country. So as far as Notre Dame continuing that success, again, you got to have the best players, and they're bringing in even better players than they had on the roster when they went to 2 college football playoffs. So, yeah, they're number one. I agree with everything you said, and I'm excited for Marcus Freeman. But, again, it is a question mark because it's an unknown. We just don't know yet.
Right.
All right, we had the same number one. What's your number 2?
Yes, Michigan.
Yes, it's same here. Okay,
it's got to be Michigan. So, especially after the year that they've had. So, I think that all it takes was beating Ohio State one time in the past. It's been a decade at least. I just needed to see that it could happen for them, under Harbaugh, and just I think for him too, because there's a huge weight lift off his shoulders. It could be done, and he did it. And he's a good coach. And I think that people get too hung up on, is he elite or not? There's only a couple elite teams, only a couple elite coaches. He's a very good coach, very good program. They hang their hat on being the winningest program in the history. It's like, hold for a year or two of him underperforming, specifically COVID year. Other than that, I mean, they've been 8-9 wins a year. This year, stepped it up, won the Big Ten. They're showing their ceiling of being able to do those kinds of things. As far as national championship goes, that's something that I do think that this era is probably not going to be as kind to them right now, because of, they're in one of the toughest sides of toughest conference, toughest divisions is what I'm trying to say. They're one of the toughest divisions that you can play in. And they've got their own booger in Ohio State playing them every year. So actually conquering that, I don't want to sell it short because of their shortcomings in the playoff. They made it to the playoff. I think people focus too much on how the season ended. Like, just appreciate what this season was. And the biggest thing it does is it validates going back. Everything that, Harbaugh has done so far, you can kind of add to the list. Okay, he's done these other things, but he has beaten Ohio State. You can't just say he's gotten there and not done it. So, and in a way, ask Michigan fans. That's as good as a national championship in the state of Michigan, at beating Ohio State, especially when they're good. There's no sanctions on this team. This team had all their players. This team has a Heisman caliber quarterback, and they have 800 million receivers that can play, and a 5-star stud running back, and they beat him. So
by double digits.
Yep. And I hate to keep honing in on this one game, but Michigan's done the rest of the season before. They've won 10 games. They've won 11 games before under Harbaugh. They've won 8-9 games regularly.
I mean, 2018
the difference in putting them in exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Ohio State hung 62 on them?
62. Yeah. Everybody was saying, oh, there's no, Michigan's going to go ahead. This will be their time that they beat them. And then they didn't. And so it was the last remaining question. And I know that's weird to say in an era where everybody's so focused on playoff, winning the championship. My last remaining question for them was, can they beat Ohio State? And they did. So they were very close to being number one for me in many ways. But I had to go with the more consistent, Notre Dame obviously making the playoff multiple times. So
Michigan was also almost number one for me. In fact, Daniel, I like to mess with numbers and like make rankings and stuff.
That's why I show up every week, Jacob, is because you mess with numbers. That's why I'm
so here. Let me tell you a little bit of the formula I've done so Michigan's also my number two. I was almost on number one. Here's kind of my formula for my back rankings. 50% I took into account the last 4 years of your program, right? Because I'm not just going to take a snippet of last year and be like, this is what defines you. It's like, no. I need a bigger picture.
Just be a power ranking of last year's team.
Right. So as far as SP plus goes, I think that's a good metric as far as how good your team is
right now. Yeah.
Michigan actually ranked ahead of Notre Dame of average SP plus ranking the last 4 seasons combined. So although Notre Dame's made 2 playoffs in that time period, Michigan's technically on average been a better team. So that was 50% of my ranking. So I almost put Michigan ahead, but again, Michigan's made 1 playoff, Notre Dame's made 2. That's really what gave the edge there, and more sustained success. Like they've been at that level. Michigan's had I know it's COVID, but they had like a big dip in 2020. So anyway, but yeah, they solidified number 2. They won the Big Ten. They won their conference. They made a college football playoff. They're a first-time college football playoff team. Again, only I forget the total number of college football playoff teams, but it's something like 14.
Yeah, so it's 14 is because I think it was 12 before last year, and last year had 2 new teams. So
yeah,
I think it's 14 now.
You beat Ohio State. You got in the playoff ahead of them. You kept them out of the playoff. And so what? You got people the national champion. So did everybody else that season in this season. So they firmly are number 2 for me, almost number 1. And my only question for Michigan now is, can you keep it up? So 1, recruiting supports that top 10 class this year. And what's Harbaugh going to do now that he's lost his coordinators, flirted with the NFL? Is it just business as usual? He's almost got all his money back with his new contract after beating Ohio State and making the playoffs. So I think he's proven he can do it, but I need to see it again this year. But as far as, last year, Daniel, you and I both had Michigan at 6 on this list. So
they made a jump.
Now they're firmly 2.
Well, would you agree? It really came down to they beat Ohio State this year.
They made a playoff. That was they had done everything else, like you said, except beat Ohio State and made a playoff. And they did both this past year.
Right.
So, I'm buying into the future with Michigan too. So Michigan 2. So of these first 2 teams, Daniel, I told you before we started, I thought 1, 2, or it should be 1 and 2. And I thought 8 should be 8. And then I'd hear any argument for 3 through 7. So This is where we're probably going to have some differing of opinion. And this is where we can kind of get into our reasoning, which will be fun. So Daniel, what's your number 3 team?
So number 3, I just kind of I'll say I went safe. I just stuck with a team that I was medium on last year. So I went Penn State. I think that they are the next best program. There's not a lot of turmoil. You don't hear a lot of, we need to fire our coach, that kind of thing. If anything, James Franklin's getting a lot of love from other places saying that they want to bring him in as a coach. Now, have they achieved at the highest level? No. Have they won the Big Ten? No. That's why they're behind Michigan on this list for me. I would need them to win the Big Ten. Well, actually, they did. They won it.
They won it in 2016.
The year that but they had 2 losses that year, and that's when Ohio State made it ahead of them into the playoff.
Yep.
So that's the thing, and people want to discount and say that Ohio State shouldn't have gone and whatever else, but there's some validation to if you lose multiple games during the season. That's why the regular season is so good with college football. But they are, like Michigan, very much stuck in that division because there's several good teams, and then you still have Ohio State that they always have to go against. So they're on this list, though, as number 3 because I do have a lot of respect for where they are. I feel like they have a really solid floor, and I think that some of these other teams that after this they don't necessarily have that solid floor, which is why I'd be concerned. And also, for me, it's a little bit of a sliding scale of backness. Like, how great were you in your heyday for these teams? So how close to that are you? I think Notre Dame's very close to it because they're nationally prominent. I think Michigan's very close to it because they're winning a lot, winning consistently. I'll say, you don't have to be national champion to be quote unquote back. I think that's same for Penn State. Penn State doesn't have a history of just winning a bunch of national championships. I do think that they are a very solid program that just needs to be in a New Year's Six bowl year in, year out. That's where I see them. And I don't think they're too far from that as a program. So that's why they're number 3 for me.
I have a different number 3. Penn State's 4 for me. So I'll talk about Penn State. So like you said, as soon as you said safe, I was like, yeah, Penn State is safe.
Yeah.
And it's because the bottom doesn't fall out. I say that, but 4-5 during the COVID year.
Right.
And then 7-6 this past year. So it was like, I firmly believe this past offseason that it was like, hey, COVID year, discount that. Look at what they've done. 11 wins, 9 wins, 11 wins. I was like, this is their bounce back season. They went 7-6. They had some injury trouble. So does everybody else in college football. So I had them at 4 only because I'm like, you've won the Big Ten, but yeah, behind Michigan because Michigan made a playoff. And like they're safe. Like they're safe. That's why they're not 3 for me because they're safe. And right. I am not buying into the future of Penn State. Like as I see what Michigan State is doing, as I see what Michigan is doing, as I see what Ohio State is doing, I see Penn State falling behind all 3 of those programs. That's so fair. That played into, again, what they've done has been consistently good. Recruiting has been consistently good. This past year is actually great. A top 6, number 6 in the country for recruiting is awesome. They just haven't gotten over the hump like Michigan did this past year. So that kept them behind Michigan for me and also behind my number 3 team. And I'll say this team has not been as safe and consistent as Penn State the past 4 seasons. But I'm heavily buying into the future of this program. And that would be Miami.
Okay.
So Miami, again, consistently like decent, like Miami, despite firing their head coach this past season, like they were not doing bad in football. Like they went 7-6, 6-7, 8-3, 7-5. So like not terrible, right. But here's why they were number 3 for me. Number 1, like Mario's got the money flowing at Miami. And money flowing is a good thing at Miami because if you can keep, a third of the kids from Miami, not Florida, from Miami home, you're going to have a top 5 class. And with that, like you got good players out of Miami, the transfer portal, you're going to have players that maybe not play elsewhere or get homesick that are going to come back home to Miami.
Right.
The staffing hires he's made have been incredible.
Phenomenal.
Incredible. And then really, I'm buying into the future. They looked really good last year playing all their young talent.
Right.
So they went 7-5, but halfway through the season, they just started playing freshmen. Because Manny Diaz was like, I'm going to keep my job because I'm going to show that I got really good young players in the roster.
Right.
So their roster is not in disarray like another team that might have fired their coach. But lastly, their path. So again, I mentioned Penn State. Penn State, I see their program is behind Ohio State, Michigan right now. The ACC Coastal is wide open. And if you can get to the ACC championship, what we think is going to happen is Clemson's going to be back this year and be normal, which means, hey, in a 1-game scenario, you got a shot to beat Clemson.
Yeah.
And if you can get through there with 1 loss on your schedule, you got a shot. Like you beat Clemson, then your strength of the schedule goes way up. And then you start bringing more recruits home. So I think the Coastal is wide open. There's no team in the Coastal that I'm like, Miami should fear moving forward. Like the only team that's even recruited close is North Carolina. And so like Miami has an easier path. So I'm really buying into the future because of really the hires. And what Mario Cristobal is doing to build that program, and they haven't been consistently bad, and their path's easier. That was kind of my reasoning for putting them above Penn State at 3.
I like it. They're my number 4, so I'll talk on them a little bit too.
Yeah.
I do feel like they were probably the closest match there. The delineation for me, why putting them here, is 4 through 7, where for me, it was teams that I was just basically ranking my feelings on them in the future. It's not has anything to, like, almost because they all have new coaches or a new coach last year, is like I I'm buying a lot of future stock in these teams. So Miami's one of those. And doesn't it feel, Jacob? It feels like it's almost like, there's always that meme of like you're playing a video game and you're holding the controller, you're holding it like this, and then it's like, okay, it's serious, you gotta get into it. So you lean forward and you're like hands are on your knees and you're focused on the game. It's felt like Miami has just been holding the controller and they just been sitting back and just like, we'll do it again. We're the U. We'll do it. We got talent. State of Miami. Have y'all seen the documentary? It's great. There's money in Miami, but it's a private school. You don't really know that there's money, and no one's actually given their money, and all this, and they don't have a guy who everybody believes in, and so they're just sitting here playing the control like this. Then all of a sudden, they're like, "Wait a second, we are Miami. Why don't we just like
act like it,
come together and do this?" So then they finally, I think this is my feeling, that they just lean forward, because Mario Cristobal is that hire, and for the first time, I have felt like when they got Ricked a few years ago, I'm not saying it was uninspired. I was excited because I was like, you know what? He's a good coach. And they finally got a good coach. And that was the first time I felt like Miami had a good coach. Since, I don't even want to say Larry Coker, because I think he was just kind of a bus driver. He's just like, whatever's going on is going on. I would say since Butch Davis, that was the first time I felt like they had a good coach at Miami, was when Mark Richt came in, and he was burnt out. He was tired. He just had all that hoopla at Georgia, and he came in and he kind of organized some things, but all he did was just structure what they had going on. He was not, hey, I'm going to get down in the deep roots of everything and really take this to the next level. Mario's that guy. Mario's going to build the trenches. Mario's going to build in recruiting, and you see it with the staff. I agree with you were hitting all of these points, Jacob. Just because they're 4 on my list does not mean that they're 4 in my excitement. They're number 1 in my excitement. So
I love it.
I'm excited to see what they do. Getting the coordinators is the biggest thing. Josh Gaddis coming down there, that's a huge get, because he's a high riser. He's someone who was trying to get the Michigan head coaching job if Jim Harbaugh left. Kevin Steele has tried to get the Auburn head coaching job twice and has been an interim head coach a couple times. So having him as your DC, but he's well respected in his field. And then, just everybody they bring, even the strength coach, bringing him from Oregon, Aaron Feld, he started out at Georgia and then went up there, and then he's got a great reputation for everything he does. I just think the recruiting on this whole staff is going to be something that we're going to look back and be like, okay, they're going to move up this list. They're the one I'm picking to be like, yeah, we're going to be talking about them maybe next year, the year after, being higher. I agree with what you said about their path. This is something I hadn't really considered with some of the other teams we were talking about. That is a very good point, though, that they do have a very clear path if they just get everybody pulling in the right direction, which it looks like they have.
Finally,
first time in forever. To quote Fred.
That's your 4. Go ahead and give me your 5.
My 5 is going to be USC.
Okay.
I have them very similar to that. I do feel like this is the first time that I've felt this way about a hire since they hired Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin didn't work out, but I felt really good about them when they hired Lane Kiffin at that time to be the head coach, because in LA, you have to have a little bit of splash. Lincoln, with his style of offense, has that. He's got the cachet to bring guys in. So I'm excited about the direction of that program. They're where they are right now, 5, because they haven't really been impressive to this point. They've definitely underwhelmed. and they've had more talent than they've shown, and they've also missed out on a lot of talent that has not been recruited well in Southern California. I mean, it's a hotbed. They should be as talented as they've been times 10, because they should be like how Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State are, where they're overflowing with 5-stars, and how Texas A&M was this year. They should be doing that because of where they are and who they are in their history. So if he can, kind of get everybody focused on that, then I'm definitely in on it. So yeah, this is definitely a hope for the future with me. I'm just a little bit less behind it than I am with Miami, but they're right there in the same ballpark for me.
So USC is my 6, and the reason I don't have them at 5, honestly, is just recent success, state of the roster, and recruiting. Like recent success, they had the 5-1 year during COVID, but before that, like 5-7, 8-5, you're 5-1, then 4-8. So like last 4 seasons, not great. Recruiting, you had that one 7th ranked class after 2020, which I think has a lot to do with people wanting to stay closer to home after COVID, because those were bookended by 63 and 65 ranked classes, which in Southern California is just unacceptable.
Right.
You could like recruit some 3-stars from Southern California and have a top 25 class. Like that is unacceptable to be USC and recruiting outside the top 25. Really, I think recruiting outside the top 10 ever should be unacceptable for USC. So in the 60s is really unacceptable. So that was really why I kept them out of the 5 slot. But I am buying USC, which is why they're ahead of a couple teams on this list, because like you've already seen the impact Lincoln Riley's had in recruiting. Like you've already seen a QB from Southern California in 2023, Malachi Nelson, like he's already committed. So like you've already got one. You're going to have more skill players that are just like, yeah, let's go make LA fun again. Like let's go light up the scoreboard. And same thing with Miami. Who is the biggest threat in the Pac-12? Not even just their division. Who's the biggest threat in the Pac-12 right now? Because Oregon has a brand new head coach, and you would say Oregon, like they've been kind of the top program in the Pac-12. Utah has a lot to do with like great coaching, and when they have a senior-laden roster, they're going to be really good. Like this season, I think Utah is going to be really good, but then they're going to have a couple years where you have your 8-4 Utahs, and then you have like your 10-2 Utah, and you have a couple 8-4 Utahs, but like USC can come in and recruit circles around everybody, have run a really fun offense in Lincoln Riley, light up the scoreboard, and I really think they're going to make the playoff within the next 3 seasons. So I don't think it's this year, but I would not be surprised at all if next season, 2023, they're in the playoff.
They've been trying to beat Utah at Utah's game, basically by just not having the talent, like not having that talent. Like that's USC's calling card. Get the talent. It's there. People want to come there.
Get the flashy player.
Make them want to come there. So
right.
Yeah, I agree. But man, these are fun teams to talk about because it looks like we might have some egg on our face in a couple of years, and these might be terrible hires and it might not work, but this feels like the right hires for the first time in a long time at these schools. So
my number 4, so USC was my 5.
Okay.
Wait.
They were your 6. What are your
my
number
6.
5?
My number 5 is Daniel. Look, I said I wasn't going to let them fool me again, but I'm jumping. I'm going all the way back in with Texas. So the reason they're ahead of USC has been recent success. So last 4 seasons, 10-4, 8-5, 7-3, 5-7 this past season. So I try not to let this past year like have a super big influence on Texas, because
you told us we were going 10-2 last year. All right.
I was convinced they had the roster for it, but
I had them at 7-5. I should have stuck with my guns.
We should have flipped it around. We'd have been perfectly accurate. Yeah. I am buying this. Sometimes when our new coach comes in, I think this was a big problem at Texas was culture. And so Texas recruited very well under Tom Herman. And that's why I think the turnaround could happen this season. Like Texas can win the Big 12 this year and be in the playoff this year, which sounds, I know, I'm just buying into the hype again. I'm buying low, going all in.
Well, it's a good time because the turnover at Oklahoma.
Exactly.
It's
who in the Big 12 is going to challenge them? So
Baylor.
Yes, honestly, God, probably. Yeah. So I think I'm buying Texas. That's why they're higher than a couple of the teams on this list. They've had better recent recruiting and recent success than USC. Like recruiting wise, their last 4 classes have ranked 3rd, 8th, 15th, Sark's first year. Then after his first full season as head coach, top 5 class, like number 5. That is the expectation at Texas. It is the expectation at USC. You should be doing that. Just like boom, top 5 class. Like, and that's while doing it. And people sometimes say like, oh, if Texas and Texas A&M are competing, what does that do class wise? Number 1 and number 5, 2 teams from Texas having top 5 classes. It can be done. Yeah. There's enough to go around for everybody to have a top 5 class and to have.
And not included in the top 5 class, Jacob, was Quinn Ewers coming back home.
So, and absolutely, and 5-star. So that's Texas is gonna be fun again. Buy low. I think the video that came out of the offensive line coach or defensive line coach, like saying some of y'all just need to transfer. Like I think that's real. I think that they did probably have some players that are not going to be a part of this winning program, winning culture, and sometimes addition by subtraction. I think that played into the season. Think about where Texas was at halftime of the Red River Shootout. Like, if they win that game, did they go 5-7 this year? Like, sometimes a game can just break.
Well, no, they would go 6-6, Jacob, because they would have won.
Thank you. So, like, think about Florida this year. Florida was doing well until that Georgia game, and the Georgia game just like derailed their season after that. And so it's tough to see one game really change a season like that for a program. And I think the Red River Shootout did that for Texas. All that being said, I am buying Texas. And the reason I have them above USC is because the past 4 years, Texas has been much better than USC.
So I was just going to jump in with Texas. I have Texas number 7.
Okay.
So I have them lower. So this is where we have a little bit of that delineation. I'm high on their future. I think I've been jaded by their just siren song where I feel like I keep jumping in on them, and I really want to, and I believe in Sark. Me and you we stood on the table last year when he got hired. We thought this was the best hire that you could have. I think going forward they have a ton to be excited about in Austin. I just think that there's just so much. I'm curious to see, as they progress. Like, I don't know if this. Well, I just want to see how things are handled going forward. I do think that there was a culture shift. I think that all that had to happen. I think I felt let down last year, where I felt like they should have at least been like a 7-win team, which is where I had picked them. But then you had talked me into 10 wins. And I came all the way up there, and
where did we settle? Did we settle at 9-3?
We may have done 9-3, just because you really talked me into it, and it's fine.
I was confident, man.
It's fine, and I love Sark, and I do think that they'll be successful. That's why they're not number 8. Okay, they're number 7. My number 6 team is Tennessee, so I'm very big on Heupel. I think that very high on Josh Heupel. I think that he was a coach a lot of people picked to fail, because Tennessee's a failing job. It's a failing program. Pruitt, it seemed like, was the guy. I'm not saying that he was Mario Cristobal, but he's cut from that Saban cloth. He's Mr. Recruiting everything, Mr. Let's get everything lined up so we can get all the funding. And so that's what he was doing. But he had all this attitude without any wins yet. And I do think that hurt the culture a little bit. Obviously, it doesn't help that they had some allegations and all those kinds of things. So that's why they're as far down on this list as they are. Just in general, they're number 6, just because I do think that they had a further way to climb. I'm concerned about recruiting just in general, because Tennessee is not a natural place to have a bunch of big-time recruits. Memphis is, but Memphis, I mean, just, that metro area, it gets hit up a bunch for, I mean, the Mississippi schools, Louisiana, Arkansas. That's just the area. I mean, Missouri. That's just all of them come into Memphis, metropolitan Memphis, and really take those players. And then if any one of them is super elite, then you've got, Alabama and Georgia and whoever else, Texas coming in. I say all that to say it's tough to recruit there, but I have a ton of respect for the production that he was able to get out of this roster that Jacob, you and I have talked about before the season. We just felt like it was depleted. He showed you all he needed is a quarterback that could complete the ball. And Hendon Hooker is that. I'm glad looking back because I was like, I'm glad that he got all those players because I was thinking, oh, Harrison Bailey is going to be his team. Well, here comes Hendon Hooker as a transfer. Well, then here comes Joe Milton as a transfer. And I'm like, what's even going on? Joe Milton starts. If Joe Milton would play the whole season, I would not have believed in Heupel. But Heupel, sure enough, found his guy. And Hooker was a phenomenal quarterback down the stretch. He was able to run that offense at that tempo that they wanted to run. And I guess in my head, I just assumed, oh, yeah, they're going to be this high-flying, only pass the ball offense. But main part of their tempo is running the ball. And they were one of the best, rushing teams in the SEC last year. And they did it with a very average to below average offensive line. So that tells me a couple of things. He can outcoach his recruiting issues that at Tennessee you will have. You're just going to have it right now. He might be able to find a guy here or there, but they're just not going to naturally recruit better than Georgia, Florida, Alabama, all these teams in there, that they play every year in their on their schedule. So is he going to be able to outcoach it? Now, he is also where he is on the list because you're going to play those teams every year, and their path, I don't know. I think they're going to have to do both. They're going to have this great coaching with some great recruiting to be able to get over the hump and beat those teams. But there's no reason they can't have a fun team to watch and go to plenty of bowl games and maybe even New Year's Six bowl games. So, that's where I am with Tennessee.
So Tennessee's my 7. Reasoning, the last 4 years have been less successful than every other team on this list, except for my number 8 team. And okay, here's the thing. Incredible year, incredible coaching job. Bud Elliott's talked a lot about this. With this Art Briles offense, like, it works really, really well when you're playing teams that are either equal talent to you or less talented than you, because they can't run with your receivers. Like with all the like high flying offense stuff going around, I love this, the WTFO, way the something out receivers outside the numbers.
They make you play 53 yards wide.
Oh yeah. So
for sure.
Problem is every single year there's at least 2 teams on their schedule that are way more talented than them because they got Bama and Georgia every year. And then, so that's like
every year.
You mentioned recruiting. Recruiting's not been great. You can't, like, the problem is you look at it, you're like, oh, like 17, that's top 25. And then you scroll down and you're like, where does that rank in the SEC?
15.
8th. Yeah. Like it's, 8th. Wow. Like, so all the teams you're playing against, yes, at least 7 rosters better than yours. And my hesitancy with buying into Tennessee is there's a lot of optimism in the SEC East right now with every team. Everyone is excited about
very true.
Either the fact that they have a brand new coach this season, everyone, and then the second year coaches are coming off of really promising starts, including Clark Lee, who hasn't won an SEC game yet. But again, Vandy's a lot different than South Carolina and Tennessee. Or you've got your Kirby Smart, Mark Stoops. So it's like, that's the state of the SEC East right now. Someone's going to have to be in the bottom half of the SEC East. And I'm not sure that it's not Tennessee. They had a really promising year, but I cannot say definitively, like, Tennessee, the next 3 years will be better than, and I can't list more than one team that I am for sure Tennessee will be better than. And That's mean. No, they're gonna be better than Vandy. But like,
I was gonna say,
I'm buying into
give them that, please.
I will give them that. But you mentioned Memphis. Look, I know there's a lot of talent in Memphis. Lock it down. Like, lock down the best ones. Georgia's locked down Atlanta. A lot of schools recruiting Atlanta, and Georgia's locked down the best ones. Like, you got to get the best ones out of there. So no excuse to not recruit Memphis. Recruit better. Show me year 2 that you're going to go 8-4, 9-3, and I will buy in more to Tennessee. But cautious pessimism, I guess. Like, I want to believe, but I'm just going to have to see it in year 2. So there's
because
my
as soon as you
Tennessee.
said that, I started thinking like, I mean, Shane Beamer has got himself a quarterback now, and like Eli Drinkwitz thinks he's about to get maybe JT Daniels and do a little something. But the Alpha Nerd's awesome, and then Kentucky and Georgia are mainstays, and Florida fired their coach for something, so they're expecting to move up.
And if Florida starts recruiting, I mean, he's already hiring a massive staff, which is another thing they were lacking in. That's what you've seen Saban do at Alabama, Kirby do at Georgia. Like, just there's people for everything. Hilarious names, by the way. For the
of course. Well, maybe that might be a show where we dive into craziest names, and I mean, several will be in Florida, but I'm sure there's some around the country. So maybe we can find something like that. That's maybe great. At least a little segment. But yeah, it's tough because you're looking up at a lot of people, or at least looking side to side, and every year it could be a little different. So that's gonna be interesting to watch. All right.
So I mentioned I thought we were gonna have the same first 2. The same number 8, and I thought the 3 to 7 would be. Here's where you can argue. That's exactly how it happened.
We were completely different on all of them too.
Yeah,
3 through 7,
which is great. And
it was different for every single one.
And you almost made me switch my mind with Penn State and Miami. You might have actually, but I'm leaving my list as is. But again, I'm like, I could hear an argument and be like, you know what? You're right. Like, that's so. All right,
you made me feel better about Texas. I almost changed it between Texas and Tennessee, but I was like, I already put Tennessee. They're staying.
There you go.
They're staying. So last but least,
Nebraska.
Yeah.
And I want to believe.
I don't, but I also have gotten to the point where I feel bad for them, because I used to feel upset that the media was all over them. You remember this? It was when we first started, our very first season doing this. They were picked to win the Big Ten West. And you and I, Jacob, looked at each other and said, why? Why were they? And then you said, okay, well, this is what people are saying. And you brought up about how Adrian Martinez, and which he still could be there. I'm just kidding. I think, did he transfer? Because I feel like he had one more season left.
Adrian Martinez?
Yeah. Am I crazy?
I think he did transfer.
Anyways, it is what it is. But as far as Nebraska goes, Jacob, they were picked to win the Big Ten West that year because of hype. You and I were both like, we don't see it. And then they fell flat on their face. I think you and I both, not that we have anything against Nebraska themselves, we just were so right about it. We were ready to dunk on people about how right we were. And then they stunk again in 2020, but it was like, okay, well, all right, COVID, everybody stunk. And then last year, I really thought, okay, this is the year. It's his money year. He's really got to do it. And there was just some bad games that, special teams was really sloppy. I mean, a lot's going to look at that first game against Illinois where they really should have put Illinois away, but Illinois ends up beating them. And obviously, I think he gave the stat last week or a week before, whenever it was, about their how many games that they had that were one score, like 4 points or less or something like that, where it was like 9, all 9 of their losses.
All 9 losses were by one score.
So that makes you think, okay, like there's got to be some hope. But I also would counter and say that's going to be gut wrenching. They just are at this point. And so, yeah, I'm at the point where I feel bad for them. It's no longer fun for me to be like, they're the worst. They're clearly the worst on this list. They're the farthest from being back. But I'd hate to say, and I think probably for you too, Jacob, that, since we factor in future success or buying stock, I mean, it's usually going to be a new coach or a newish coach. Frost has been there. This is his 5th year.
This is year 5.
Yeah. This is his 5th.
18, 19, 20, 20. Yeah, year 5.
This is his 5th year. So all his players, zero excuses. And if he can't do it, I mean, he could be fired. He might just be able to hang out. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what the future holds. But all these other coaches, it's like, okay, there's at least hope, because they're new or they, have been there for a year or, they've shown life. This one, it is what is a little uninspiring. They're, they used to be a blue blood. I don't want to use the word blue blood. I don't even know if whatever. That's a whole nother show. But yeah, they're not back, and they're far from it right now.
Nebraska, they're number 8 for a reason. I think everyone listening to this, if they made their own ranking, would rank Nebraska number 8. I mean, you just go look at record by year, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, this is the worst one by far. And you talk about hope. I'm with you in that I don't have anything definitive that I'm like, okay, like this is what I have to hope in, because like recruiting's not great.
You got Casey Thompson, so
he got a big transfer quarterback. But again, because he lost all 9 games by 1 score last year, Scott Frost, he bought himself 1 year to prove it. So like my thing is, I think if they don't, at the minimum, go to a bowl game this year, he's gone. Like, I think if you want to, like, I think you need to go 7-5, like go win 7 games. And the Big Ten West, like, is not getting any easier. Like Minnesota's cycling up. Iowa's consistently good. Wisconsin's consistently good.
I think it's when. I think it's also when he wins these games. You're talking about going to a bowl game. I don't think he could be 0-3 and keep a job. I think that's how short the leash is this year. Agreed. I think it's got to be they are win a couple, lose one, win a couple, lose 2. If he's only going to make a bowl game this year, that's how close I think the leash is this year.
So this year, you can go 2-0. You get North Dakota and Georgia Southern. Third game, you got Oklahoma.
Wait, North Dakota State or just North Dakota?
Just North Dakota.
Okay, so just North Dakota. I think that's a dub. Georgia Southern. Don't count your chickens before they hatch with Georgia Southern. That's all I got to say.
What do we want?
Florida, all right? So they didn't even have to throw a pass to
That's right.
But Florida that year.
After that, you have Indiana, Rutgers, Purdue, Illinois. Like, you got to win 3 of those 4 games. I mean, at the very minimum, if you go 2-2 through that stretch, what does that put you at? 4-3. Oh God, I think you gotta go 3-1 in that stretch. You got to come on the other side of that 5-2, because then you have to win one of Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. You got those back to back.
Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa.
Minnesota at Michigan, Wisconsin at Iowa.
And you think, I mean,
that is backloaded.
Just from your gut, all of those teams, I mean, I haven't even looked at roster turnover of all teams yet. We're going to do that obviously later as we get closer to because we have a whole nother, roster turnover with the transfer portal again, I'm sure. But all 4 of those teams, they're all going to project higher right out of the gate than Nebraska. They, like, on a neutral field, all of them would be favored right now as the roster stands over Nebraska by at least a touchdown.
I missed one. Northwestern. They open up against Northwestern Ireland.
So, oh, okay.
But still, I mean, if I'm just looking at the schedule and guessing, I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm saying those 4 games. That's how tough they are. They're not just tough where it's like, oh, it's either way. I think that
if I'm being
depends on what Minnesota is the closest one that they could win. But
if I'm being an optimist, I'm picking 5-7. I think that you lose your job at that point. So here's my final question with Nebraska, and we can wrap up. Like, if Scott Frost can't get it done, is it a lost cause? Like, what coach are you going to get to come to Nebraska and be like, who's a better hire than Scott Frost at the time? You got. We know what we know now, but at the time, everyone praised this hire. That's why they picked him to win the Big Ten West his first season.
Right.
Like, is Nebraska a lost cause? Is it just they will never be what they once were?
I mean, I hate to be like that because I do think you're only one hire away from it happening. And there's a lot of times that it's someone you just don't even know. They're on the
True.
periphery. There's times though where Jacob, I want to be like, why don't y'all just run the option? See what happens.
Worked in the 90s. Oh, goodness. Well, that's our Who's Back ranking. One of my favorite episodes we do every year, Daniel. So, hey, I love it. We had some, 3-7 was a lot of mismatch, but hey, we got the same top two, same number 8, but that was a fun discussion.
It was our own version of March Madness, that crazy 3-7. So
that's it. Yeah, some random upsets. Why Texas is back. All that fun stuff. Anyway, well, hey, you can follow him on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. And that will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob.